Hi, this is Ashisha Bidekar and welcome to my podcast, The ARB Show. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Patrick. Patrick is a former Silicon Valley marketing executive with C-level experience at startups and Google, and with over 20 years of experience building and scaling companies and brands. He's a CEO coach and advisor to executives at Google, Facebook, Yahoo, and leading startups including Butterfly and Zeppelin in Latin America. He is a motivational keynote speaker on topics of leadership, startups, high performance teams, and transformation. He is the CEO and co founder at Leap, an executive coaching company. He is also an author, and his book, Step Back and Lead, is getting 5-star ratings on Amazon. He has just moved to Miami, Florida from Santiago, Chile. Patrick, welcome to the show. Do share more about your life journey and your vision for Leap. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Ashisha. It's been a very long time since we talked. It's good to be here. I think you summed up nicely my career. I spent the last 20 years working in technology companies, mostly in startups. I was fortunate enough to work a couple of years at Google, where I built and led the marketing team, which created and launched Google Play, which is obviously Google's app store. And the majority of my focus professionally has been, leading and building marketing teams for small, high-growth companies. Became a coach 5 years ago after being laid off by one of those companies. I had one of these midlife crisis, as they call them, and came to the conclusion that I was no longer excited and no longer felt a lot of meaning and purpose in what I was doing. And so I hired an executive coach, and I worked with that person for about 9 months and came to the conclusion that, my whole reason for being in purpose was to inspire and be the magnetic energy that inspires people to lead careers of meaning and purpose. And so I did a pivot and moved, 8,000 miles away to Santiago, Chile, started an executive coaching company, Leap, which has worked with, Walmart, Scotiabank, Banco Consorcio, Banco Bice, a bunch of leading technology startups in the region. And I work as a motivational speaker, and I'm very excited to have recently launched a new book on the art and process of change based on all my challenges and life experiences. So delighted to be here and share some thoughts with you and your listeners.
Okay, great. And Patrick, it's always really exciting to have discussions with you because you're so lively and energetic. So I'm sure your mentees and your clients would be equally thrilled. So as we discussed, I would like to have the format in which the guest talks about some top 3 areas or top 3 do's and don'ts in the domain of their expertise. And so in that context, I would request you to talk about top 3 do's and don'ts for bouncing back after a layoff. It would be really helpful for the audience. And I'm sure, as we all know, there's lots of layoffs galore, right, happening across the world. So this, I think, could be a very timely, kind of a help and a tool for people who might be affected by layoffs. So over to you, Patrick.
Sure. I mean, layoffs is sadly a part of the reality in which we live, right? And the unfortunate thing is oftentimes it's not necessarily driven by the economic need of a company. It's more driven by the need of companies to remain or be profitable, right? And so I think one of the questions I think we need to ask ourselves is, what is the purpose of business? Is it really just about profits, or do companies have more responsibility beyond that? But to address your question directly, I've worked with a lot of executives in career transition, and I went through a big career transition, when I was laid off 5 years ago, and I decided to take my career in a completely different direction and reinvent myself, which is very difficult and very scary, particularly when you're in your late 40s and you're divorced and you have, financial responsibilities. So, one of the first things I always tell people when they've been laid off is you have to take care of yourself. It is a very traumatic experience. It makes you question your self-worth. You worry a lot about the future. You worry about providing for your family. You are, in many cases, I think particularly men, we suffer from the fact that our identity is so tied to what's on our business card. And so the day we lose that, we almost cease being who we are, right? And so I always tell people, the first thing to really remember when you've been laid off is take care of yourself, right? More than ever, you have to make sure that you're getting 7 or 8 hours of good quality sleep. And on my Instagram page and YouTube, I have literally videos where I talk about what does it mean to get good sleep, because there are literally books that have been written about the science and the importance of sleep. So sleeping well is so important because it affects our energy level, it affects our mood, it affects our level of empathy, it affects our ability to focus, and it affects our relationships with others. So when we're not sleeping, on top of the fact that it has disastrous consequences on your physiology, that's a recipe for disaster, right? So get good sleep. The second thing, along with taking care of yourself, you have to eat healthy, right? I think most people intuitively know that you should eat healthy, but they don't do anything about it, right? And so you need to make sure that you're staying away from alcohol, you're staying away from carbonated drinks or things that contain a lot of sugar, you're staying away from processed foods, you're eating at a healthy clip every couple of hours, you're maintaining your glucose level high enough to be energized. Because again, all of these things have an impact on your energy, and particularly when you've been laid off, it's very easy for our energy to flag, and that affects our mood, and that affects our optimism, and it affects our job, our ability to reinvent ourselves. And the last thing, again, this sounds obvious, but most people don't think about this, or they don't directly make the connection, is when I say taking care of yourself, it's even more important to exercise than it was before. Exercise is always important. But, I built this routine over the last, 5-10 years. I get up at like 5:30, 6 a.m., I meditate. And then the next thing I do is, 45 minutes of workout, right? Whether it's yoga or cycling or weights, I'm always working out. I'm always incredibly active. And, my doctor laughed because he said, yeah, you have the energy and the blood pressure of an 18-year-old. Like, how do you do this, right? And so, when you sleep well, when you eat well, when you manage your energy and you do exercise regularly, you'll find that those things have a meaningful impact on your ability to get through even the toughest of crises.
Right. I mean, the first point what you mentioned was bang on. I was comparing notes when you just mentioned that, because I myself have gone through 3 layoffs, right? And and I had read somewhere that
me too.
So the first thing which I did, that always stay positive and take care of yourself. Like, sleep is one of the unsung heroes, right? And it's many a times, in the modern life, unfortunately, it is seen as being sissy if you kind of need a 8-hour sleep, or if you kind of have a routine sleep time. If, for example, if you go to bed by say 10, you're seen as already an old man, because
totally.
It's okay to have late nights, but point is, can have late nights once in a while, but it really screws up your system, and more so after layoff when you're already in a vulnerable emotional stage. So that's great. What would be your second advice to people on what they should be doing?
My second advice is, when we look in the world that we live in, right, we live in a world of exponential change, right? That's the only way to term it, right? And I think, anybody who's read anything about artificial intelligence or who isn't living underneath a rock, realizes, how fast the world is moving. And so, what I always encourage people to do, and I do this religiously, is, when you're laid off, it's an amazing opportunity to spend time nurturing your brain, learning. As much as I tell people, fitness is so important. Fitness is part of my identity as a person, as a coach, as a founder, as a motivational speaker. In the same way that you have to watch out how you're nourishing yourself and what you're putting into your body, you have to watch out what you're putting into your brain. Right? This is an amazing opportunity for you to read incredible books, for you to listen to amazing podcasts, right? For you to watch amazing documentaries, for you to sign up and subscribe to remarkable, podcasts and shows on YouTube. There is so much great content out there. posted by so many amazing people, who are passionate about content, like you and others, that, you owe it to yourself to literally block off time every day and dedicate a couple of hours every day to learning something new. And think about that in terms of, what are the skills and trends in the market that are going to make me more marketable, right? How does artificial intelligence make me a better marketer? How does it make me a better product manager, right? There's so many cool things that are happening now in terms of not just technology, but other things that can enhance our learning. It's the best time to do that. When I was laid off and it became a habit, I just started reading like crazy, and I've read so many amazing books. And of course I ended up writing my own book, Step Back and Leap, which just came out a few months ago, and you mentioned that. That every time I read a book, I realize how little I know. But the amazing thing is when I read books, I'm able to take that knowledge and serve others with that knowledge, right? I'm able to go work with my clients, and I'm able to talk to them about leadership or neuroscience or the power of storytelling or prioritization or productivity. That it's an endless amount of learning that you can do. And, the other thing I tell people is, when you're laid off, one of the things that you need to do also is you need to get out and network, right? You need to meet other people. And so if you choose to take a course or attend a seminar, that's a great way not only to turbocharge your learning, but also to meet other people, to get out of the house and see new people and new things, right? So they complement each other very well, and you'd be amazed where that can help you take your career, right? So it's really a win-win.
Another way of looking at this also is like, reading is like brain food. And another mental model which I kind of read somewhere and I use it always, that it's when you're trying to bounce back, right? Think of yourself as a champion, right? You're preparing for a big upcoming game. So one is the physical motivation, the physical fitness. Other is the mental fitness, right? So probably reading books or doing all that stuff also sets into that mental frame of mind in terms of, one is staying abreast of the areas in your specific industry or vertical of interest, and at the same time, as you mentioned, soft skills which are very important, right? So those could be pointers, and many times what I've seen is, once you read books, you also reflect. You kind of get exposed to new ideas, and then books. Overall, I think that's a great tip. What would be what would be a third tip for in terms of to do?
My third tip is not very intuitive for a lot of people. I think the other two tips are probably more obvious. But the third thing I always tell people is, when you're laid off, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it is really an opportunity for you to question where you're going in life and what you want out of your career, what you want out of your life, what you want out of your relationships, right? And when I hired my coach, I spent an enormous amount of time just looking inside myself, right? And really thinking about what I enjoyed doing, what I disliked doing, why I had lost my job, what I learned from that process. But more than that, I did a lot of analysis. Like I did, the Enneagram, I did the Myers-Briggs, assessment. I did the Benzinger Thinking Styles assessment. I took seminars to better understand myself as a human being and better understand the psychology behind the person that I am. And I think not enough people do that. And so many people I know, including very smart people in Silicon Valley, they get laid off, and the first thing they do is they polish their resume and they jump right back into the market to look at the same job that they were doing before in the same company. That is not necessarily going to solve your problem. It might solve the problem of putting food on the table, which I understand is a major concern for many people, and it is for me, and that's fine. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find fulfillment or growth by just doing more of the same. And so what I would always tell people is challenge yourself to really think about what you want out of your life. The Japanese have this wonderful expression called ikigai, which is, kind of like finding a life of meaning, right? And and kind of like purpose. And, when you have a life of purpose, your life changes. When you are able to find ikigai, which is a combination of what the world needs, what you're passionate about doing, what you can be paid for doing, and what you're good at doing. When you can find a career that is the intersection of those four things, your life completely changes. Because work no longer ceases to be work. Steve Jobs talked about passion. I don't think passion is the right word, right? I think ikigai is a much better way of looking at it because it combines those four things. So what I always tell people is, really spend some time asking yourself hard questions. Do the diagnostics. Go online and use a site like 16personalities.com. Ask questions to people, who can give you an outside perspective on what am I good at? What do you see me doing in my career? What are the hidden skills and talents that I'm not leveraging? What are the things that are holding me back? Right? So the more you learn about yourself, the more you will be able to find a career that can give you that meaning and purpose, and the more your career and your life will change as a result. But you have to invest that time to get to know yourself, because it will bear a lot of fruit later on in your life if you invest that time.
Right. No, that's a very, very valid point. And as you rightly mentioned, often neglected point, because unless when it's time to bounce back, having some kind of a personal self audit as to where you stand, etc., would really go a long way, as you rightly mentioned, on finding your right ikigai kind of thing. So that's really great. Now shifting gears and coming to the don'ts, right? What would be your advice to people, or what are the kind of first thing they shouldn't be doing at all after career?
I mean, the don'ts are kind of obvious, right? I think, some people will get fired and they will use that as an excuse to spend hours, binge watching Netflix or playing video games or consuming content that frankly is junk for their brains, right? And that, while I understand that, while there may be the temptation to kind of have some fun or relax or kick back or just trying to get your mind off something else, and look, I play video games as well. I love playing video games. And a good Netflix show. When you spend too much time doing that, or too much time on social media, or too much time on YouTube consuming content that frankly does not help you, you're wasting valuable time. And I always tell people, the most precious thing that you have in life is your time. That is the one thing that you cannot buy more of, right? And it is the one thing that when you have an abundance of time and you learn how to use it properly, you can do amazing things with that, right? And so I would just tell people, try and really manage how much time you're wasting on entertainment. I mean, entertainment does have a place in our life, but it shouldn't have a massive place where it's taking away valuable time and hours from things you should be doing, right? That would be the first tip I would say.
Right. No, in fact, a very interesting thing that even for normal people who are not laid off, even it's a useful tip, because before you're just you just wasted a good amount of time. It's really actually not helping you per se. Yeah, so that's a very
I mean it's amazing how much time we have that is dead time. Like when I am making breakfast in the morning, I'm listening to a podcast or I'm listening to an audiobook. When I'm taking breaks in between work sprints, I'm on my Kindle, reading about, digital marketing for books or artificial intelligence, right? And so I think I'm obviously probably a little bit more obsessive than the average person in terms of self-improvement, because that's what I do. This is what I help people. I help people be the best version of themselves, right? So I have to walk the talk. But yeah, when you're spending a lot of time consuming junk, you're killing your time and you're not doing your brain any favors. So.
True. Great. So what's your second tip on what are the things they shouldn't be doing?
Avoid the news. It's as simple as that. There is so much crap out there. There is so much junk out there. It is so easy to get swept up in the economy of distraction, which is really what it is, right? It is the economy of distraction. And when we allow ourselves to read about, Trump's 15th trial, or shootings or things. I'm not saying these things are not important, all right? Certainly they're very important to some people, but I'm saying that kind of like, in my experience, I found that watching the news on a regular basis sapped my energy. It angered me. It made me feel emotions I didn't want to feel. It was in no way productive, and I was not learning anything, right? So, there are exceptions, right? If you read the Wall Street Journal, or you read the New York Times, or you read The Economist, or you read, the Financial Times, there's some great news publications. There's some amazing things that there's some news that's worth reading, but there's just so much crap out there, and it's so negative that, spending your time watching the news or reality TV shows or scrolling through social media to look at, who's wearing what or who's divorcing who, this is just useless, right? It can be mildly entertaining, but you will find that, unfortunately, I've worked at Google. Social media platforms are designed to engage, right? They will suck minutes and hours of your life because that's how they make money. And you will lose minutes and hours of your life if you're not careful, right? So I would just avoid the news as much as possible. And if you decide to consume news, try and select, credible, verifiable sources where you're actually learning something in the process.
Right. And very true, because, many times it's a kind of a slippery slope of negativity, right? So you kind of you get enraged by something, and go to social media, post a negative comment, and it's a never-ending loop. Whereas you can spend that 30 minutes brushing up a skill. Very true.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like I could spend 30 minutes watching Chris Christie, bash, Donald Trump on CNN, or I can spend 30 minutes reading a good book that's actually going to give me skills that I need to do my job better, right? It's a choice.
Got it. Great. So what would be your final tip in terms of tones to people?
Look, my final tip, when you're laid off, I think one of the things that is the hardest is that, human beings are creatures of habit, right? So we get up at the same time, we have a routine, we get up, we have our coffee, maybe we go for a walk or something, we dress, we shower, we have breakfast, we go to the office, and we have our routine, right? And so when you get fired, all of a sudden you lose that routine, like almost instantaneously overnight. You wake up the next morning looking at the ceiling, you don't have to go to work, and it's like, holy shit, what the hell do I do now, right? So what I always tell people is kind of like, it's okay to mourn and feel bad for yourself for a couple of days. And I always encourage people to, come to reality with the fact that they've just been laid off, and it's okay to feel bad for a couple of days or a week or whatever. But once you've given yourself that time to feel bad for yourself and process what's happened to you, it's very important to get back into a routine and to realize that you are now in a new job, which sadly is unpaid, but that new job is finding your next job, or it is finding your next startup, or it is finding what the hell you're going to do with your life. So, what I always tell people is start with your calendar. Start with Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, whatever calendar app you use. Look at the 5 days of the week and think of, how am I going to use every single hour of my day? I'm going to get up at this time, get up always at the same time, go to sleep always at the same time, right? We, as human beings, we have to pay attention to our circadian rhythm. When we're finely tuned and we have good sleep habits, we automatically get up and go to sleep at the same time, right? So get into good sleeping habits. Avoid caffeine at night, avoid working out at night, things like that. But get yourself into a routine very quickly where you very quickly structure your days. You wake up at the same time, you have breakfast, you meditate, you work out, you do whatever. And then from this time to this time, you're reading, or you're taking an online class. And from this time to this time, you're having lunch, in the city with a friend. And from this time to this time, you are, doing some more reading, or you're online, taking a course on artificial intelligence, right? So you want to take your day and you want to break it into chunks. And it's almost like you're setting yourself meetings with yourself, right? It's like, this is Ashis's meeting to learn about artificial intelligence in marketing, right? And I'm going to spend an hour to that. This is Ashis's meeting to do 30 outreaches to meet 5 new people this week, right? So if you structure your day by your calendar and you assign hourly slots to doing certain things, that will force you to do those things and get into a routine where you will be making progress in developing your career. You'll be meeting new people, you'll be learning new things, and you will feel that you have momentum and progress. Part of the biggest problem people have when they're jobless is they lose motivation. They're so aimless. They don't have a plan. You know, not having a plan, it's like failure to plan is planning to fail, right? You have to have a plan. You have to structure your day so you get the most out of it, and you'll feel that you have momentum. You'll feel you're getting things done. You'll feel that you're meeting people. You'll feel like things are moving forward. And as long as things are moving forward and you're making progress, well, guess what? You'll be okay at some point. It's just a question of time. You just got to keep at it. But when you structure your day and you get the most out of it, and you can say, man, I had 3 good meetings, and I, read this book, and I read these 3 articles, and, I learned 5 new ChatGPT prompts, then you're going to feel like you're making progress, and it's going to feel worthwhile, right? You have direction.
Very true, very true. Thanks, Patrick. It was really a fantastic perspective. And
thank you.
Thank you, dear
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. The presentation in the show call notes will have Patrick's social media links and bonus content that you should definitely check. Do subscribe, share, and like the podcast. Available on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. Bye for now. Talk to you soon.